And this is a little section about the women in the poetry workshop at a particular moment when they all, I don't think anything here has to be explained, when they all sort of stop for a second and are enjoying each other and are laughing. It was good that we had that moment because the future was preparing a little something for all of us. Those ink-black eyes staring out of the unknown, not where we come from, but where we are headed. Those eyes staring back into the self as the dead stared back at those gathered around the bed weeping in long-ago days when pennies were placed on the eyelids of the gone. Back when a mirror was held up to the dying mouth, the hand holding the mirror trembling, the heart hopeful for a little cloud of breath on the clear surface. We also stared and laughed as if prison were a kind of hypnotic state, and we were all just waking up from a trance. The future could be imagined even in this stopped time, this detour around life, prison. I was not a prisoner as they were, but I felt it too. What kept the mind hypnotized was the idea of someday. Someday we'll walk free. Someday we'll step out of jail. Someday saunter out of confinement, smiling out of the new self, moving forward. But it wasn't going to happen like that, on that day or any other day. Not for any of us. We were going to pay for the pennies to close our eyes, for the splinter of mirror, to confirm our stopped breath, pay for our elbow room in the morgue. You had to be able to afford hope. It belonged like justice to those who could handle the bills. We were all moving toward that future, one Polly Lyle Clement knew about. Polly Lyle, who had the gift of sight, looked into each of us and knew what was to come. These were women who had come up against the law, and the law was not going to be any kinder to women in the future. I believe that that's what she winked back. In the meantime, in the poetry workshop, the matter at hand was to find, as it always is in poetry, not just a way to hint at expression, but rather a way to find the right words for it all, as we live. The right words for confusion and desire, for rats as big as dogs, for the wilderness of stars, the pennies of a mirror, the Red River Valley, a name in a Bible, the Twin Cities, for switch, for the man-woman, for the shawl and the gun, for the gift of sight. As Polly's great-granddaddy said, the difference between the almost right word and the right word is a really large matter. It's the difference between the lightning bug and the lightning. It's important to know, I think, and probably still true, that women tend to go to prison for two kinds of crime. One is the so-called victimless crime. That would be prostitution, drugs, shoplifting kind of thing. And then at the other end, they go to prison for murder. There's nothing much in between. With men, there's a lot of burglary and, those men, grand larceny and ducking over the 7-Eleven and stuff. With women, it tends to be, either these victimless crimes, stealing a Twinkie, as I say in the book, or blowing the pimp's head off, or the husband, or whomever. This particular poem happens to be a poem about the other end of the spectrum, violence. In the transaction, the ongoing transaction, business arrangement between a pimp and a prostitute, there are rules. And from the pimp's point of view, one of the worst things that can happen, in quotes, or for, I guess, the deal breaker for him, is if the prostitute holds money back, that is to say, holds money back from him. If he finds out about it, it's the end of their relationship. He tends to take revenge, usually physical, often, well, sometimes it's the end for this woman, but also often the pimp will in some way damage her face or damage her physicality, so she will no longer be attractive, we would say, to a possible clientele. You ask how I got this face, and I say I got this face by having a mind to stand up to the bloodsucker. Took my body, took my arms and legs, tits, ass, cunt, tongue, my pretty hair, sold them all to bad 10 years and cheat me straight up. And when I took my own body back from him and all he stole, he come looking for me, and when he show up and find me, he bend a hanger straight, keep the wire white, tie me up in front of my baby son so he could see how my face open up by that wire. He slice all ways, rip side, rip back, rip slash over my nose bone and up. So he say, you never look good to no man again. And so right. I look no good to him. That other day when I shot him once, then got the gun up under his chin. Slick, I say, better smile one last for me, 'cause now you get to have a new face, too. Again, and she smiled and nodded at me. Polly, are you okay? She turned abruptly to me, and a strange animation, much like the puppet-like energy I noticed in her early on, surfaced suddenly. She grasped my hands so hard they hurt. I ain't about to ask you to pray for me, she said, but I know if you did, I'd be saved in a flicker. I shan't ever forget you. You say what you want to, but you got more sand in you than any girl I ever seen. You got grit. Enough grit to turn around Judas if you took a hang to doing so. I don't know if it would do no good at all to pray for me, as I said, but if you took a notion to get me in your petitions, what with your grit? Why, I know least ways I'd get to the pearly gates, if not past him. You see, I knew a man fell down a well twice. He said he didn't mind the first time, but he thought the second time was once too often. That's about how I feel now. I've been down that well twice over, and as Providence has it, that's just about enough. I may be dazed with admiration for this old world, but I can't stand to be civilized. I can't stand to be taken up and made much of, so it looks to me to be time to light out. I'd rather go back down home in a steamboat in style. Ain't no slouch of an idea, though a raft voyage suit me too. And sometimes I think these presidents and congressmen and wardens might be liars, maybe even humbugs and frauds. You see, you don't want any unfriendliness on a raft. For what you want above all things on a raft is for everybody to be satisfied and feel right and kind towards the others. Polly, I said, can you hear me? And then she goes on in this vein. At one point saying, the angels are here. They're here now arguing just out the window about who up to coming in first to catch me a beckoning. I told them heaven for climate, hell for company. But they're an earnest lot and would rather spend hours wing brightening. A good going over, grace triumphant, sounding the river, her heart sounded, the heart of a child, wing brightening. He said, if you find yourself on the side of the majority, it's time to reform. He said, the trouble ain't that there's too many fools, but that the lightning ain't distributed right. He said, nevertheless, that on a raft, what you want above all things is for everybody to be satisfied and to feel right and kind towards the others. That's what you want, Polly Lyle, the old man once said, if you can get it to happen. And I'm just going to read a tiny bit of Measures 2 at one point. Well, let's put it this way. The real Assata Shakur is now in Cuba. A girl like you. I went to college, got down with Huey and the Panthers and the Weathermen. I converted Muslim and I fell in love. I wrote some poems, but here's the difference between us. If white people join together as a political force, it's a good thing. If black people advocate for themselves, it's a cause for fear, and ultimately the violence of the state, a threat, and you believe in justice. I believe in justice, I just can't say what it is. For his blood on the street, lights in my eyes, evidence being planted on me. I could shoot a gun, young blood taught me, but I looked at him on the ground and I chose not to squeeze that trigger. What kind of fair trial you think I'd get? I started to answer something glib about the jury system, but she cut me off. Her eyes were dark with fury. No, you tell me, what kind of fair trial, what kind of justice do you think I'll be handed? I knew the answer. There's no justice for me. You see, girl, you heard the expression, people got to make their own justice. We sat there looking into each other's eyes. And poetry can try, but it can't make this world fair now, can it? I didn't answer. I had no answers for her, not even my mother's voice reciting Shelley, Weak for the World's Wrong, or Kurilakov's devastating view of the kind of poetry that political ideologies end up writing. What is it that you want me to say, I asked. What is it that you want me to do? You already made up your mind about everything in advance. No, she said, I'm still waiting for you to teach me something real about poetry. Give me, please, just one line of a poem about the fight to stay human in prison.